Ladies and gentlemen, I am back in the saddle, back in the Central Texas Command Center, back in the crow's nest, in the cockpit, and I am ready. Wow. The Supreme Court ruled that Obama can't keep bringing illegals in and violating the law, so he came out and said, I don't care what they say, I'm going to continue it, but it gets worse. It's mainstream news that the UN is actually running the program. We already told you that, but it's now in mainstream news. Mainstream TV is reporting it. Let's go to this report, though, on the British exit and how big this really is for everybody out there. This is a devastating victory for humanity. I'm telling you, we are turning the tide. We've not completely won yet, but this is a massive event. Here's John Bound reporting.
The New World Order is getting its butt kicked at high noon. Thankfully, the highly suspicious demise of Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia has, for the time being, not been a factor in the Supreme Court's decision on Obama's dangerously lawless immigration policy, as Obama pushes the country to the brink of anarchy. Of course, it didn't take long for the Obama administration to thumb its nose at the deadlocked judicial branch and the will of the American people.
Deferred action policy that has been in place for the last 4 years is not affected by this rule. Enforcement priorities developed by my administration are not affected by this ruling. This means that the people who might have benefited from the expanded deferred action policies, long-term residents, raising children who are Americans or legal residents, they will remain low priorities for enforcement.
But like a castle made of sand, the fragile globalist secret world government has been dealt a strong blow by the waves of consciousness, inevitably finding a way to the shore of a free world. Adon Salazar writes, Nigel Farage, the leader of the UK's Independence Party, which played a huge part in mobilizing UK citizens behind the Brexit, speculated the momentum behind the results could usher in a Trump presidency. With the Brexit debacle landing in the laps of the self-serving, arrogant Bilderberg scum, a propulsion of liberty is accelerating, and the globalists know it. Brace yourself for planetary turbulence. The New World Order will either go quietly in the night, as they wisely should, or their maniacal desperation to rule the world will result in more false flags and order out of chaos, ultimately winding its way down the path toward a very public downfall. People have been asking, how will the Brexit affect the United States? Will it impact the stock market, the Federal Reserve's interest rate, global diplomatic relations? These questions are all based on a ruinous, stagnant, counterfeit system devouring the sovereignty of nations that must be finally recognized and dismantled. Presidential candidate Donald Trump congratulated the UK for voting to assert its independence from the EU and encouraged the American people in November to also assert their independence from the global elite.
You know, I said this was going to happen, and I think that it's a great thing, and we will see, but I think it's going to be a great thing.
And he wants to take the Cameron right to resign?
Basically, they took back their country. That's a great thing.
Following the British vote to exit the EU, Trump said the election results marked a shift toward more nationalistic tendencies. The Trump campaign said in a statement, come November, the American people will have the chance to redeclare their independence. Americans will have a chance to vote for trade, immigration, and foreign policies that put our citizens first. They will have the chance to reject today's rule by the global elite and to embrace real change that delivers a government of, by, and for the people. Trump continued, I hope America is watching. It will soon be time to believe in America again. As InfoWars has reported countless times, the idea for the European Union globalist superstate came directly out of discussions held at the secretive Bilderberg Group conference in 1955, at which European politicians considered the necessity to bring German people into a common European market as quickly as possible. The lunacy of the global elite can't survive once their dark secrets are completely exposed. Thomas Jefferson once said, nothing can stop the man with the right mental attitude from achieving his goal, and nothing on earth can help the man with the wrong.
It is Sunday, the 26th day of June, 2016. I'm your host, Alex Jones. We'll be here live for the next 2 hours, as we are every Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. Central live, and re-aired on Fine AM and FM affiliates across the United States, blasting out across the world via the somewhat still free World Wide Web, the Internet. My friends, obviously we have a full plate this evening. Don't forget we have the weekday broadcast as well, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Central, and also re-aired on fine affiliates across the United States. You can always find the free audio and video feeds, the free iPhone and Android apps and podcast links and more at Infowars.com/show, because there's a war on for your mind. And those of you that are awake, those of you that know what's happening, you can see that the fight against globalism, the fight against world government has now been drug out in the open. And the forces of human liberty and self-determination and sovereignty of the individual and the nation state, of the man and the woman, are now becoming central. They've denied this globalist program was going on forever, because if you deny reality and people live in a fantasy land, well, then you're never threatened as an elite. But we, in the liberty movement worldwide, the pro-human, pro-Renaissance, true liberal movement that Thomas Jefferson is the greatest example of, are beginning to win the info war on every front. The globalists still have the centralized control, but they've robbed it fraudulently. They have gotten into control by deceit, and it is illegitimate. It is fraud. It is null and void. We're on the march. The global technotronic technocracy is on the run. Obviously, the Brexit took place Thursday, and despite massive election fraud, with people's votes being reversed and harassment and demonization campaigns, England voted to get out of the European Union because it maintained some of its sovereignty when it entered the UK. But now Scotland is threatening to try to block that vote along with Northern Ireland. It shows why it's not good to ever waive your rights into a larger so-called union. But this is a devastating victory. The fight's not over. But once you admit there's a world government, once you admit the EU is a central hub of that, once the statements of the former head of the EU, Herman von Rompuy, and others about we're establishing world government through the EU, merging with the American Union and the Asian Union, I mean, these are real video clips that I have in my film, The Obama Deception, that I have in my film, Fall the Republic. I mean, I have scores of these clips of British prime ministers and U.S. senators and German chancellors saying we're establishing a private global corporate government with world taxes through the EU. It is the model of it. We're going to get rid of our borders, and we're going to merge with the Middle East and merge with Africa. That's what the EU's doing now, outside of law. Once that debate is forced out in the open, there's no reversing it. Oh, the Federal Reserve's not private, it's federal. Well, everybody now knows it really is private, and it was a giant scam. In national polls, 95% in Gallup want it audited. We've gone from one person 20 years ago in Congress sponsoring the bill to it passing the House and narrowly being blocked in the Senate. Oh, but they called us tinfoil hat people. Well, that gets a little old, just like we told people 20 years ago. There was a plan to phase out the gas tax and give you a tax by the mile with a tracker box in your car. That's now being implemented in more than 16 states next year. Exactly as we said it would be, because we were reading the MIT reports, we were reading the big UN plans, we were reading the big consortium meeting documents on air. And now on the West Coast, Oregon launching program to tax drivers by the mile. And I have the Washington Post here. East Coast states want to tax drivers' travel, not their gas, and track everywhere you go and what you do. And, of course, they've already done this in areas of Europe. On average, they double the cost of travel, turning your car into a taxi. But I digress. They want to keep us from ever having a debate about what's really going on. It's like the TPP. The Trans-Pacific Partnership's been negotiated for 7 years in secret. Congress wasn't even allowed to read it. InfoWars and Drudge and other Patriot sites like WorldNet Daily made a big deal about it the last few years. And so in the last 6 months, Congress was allowed to go in and read one page at a time, but not tell anyone what was in it. How could Congress, even under pressure, be only allowed to look at it one page at a time when it was over 12,000 pages long? Well, how does the EU appoint leaders in places like Greece and Italy? And now they want to do it in Spain. They want to do it they appoint the leaders, and it's always a former head of Goldman Sachs. Isn't that funny? And Goldman Sachs is at the heart of funding a world government project. This is a Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan project more than anything else. It's planetary corporate rule. And they want to just keep us in the point of always debating with the New Yorker magazine and Raw Story and more than 50 other articles I saw in the last 2 days. Didn't even have time to read them all. Only read 5 or 6. Attacking yours truly, saying I'm insane and Donald Trump's insane when he says that the British exit vote is a blow to globalism, a blow to world government, a blow to unelected bureaucracy. And they quote us and make fun of it and then twist quotes and things I've said to make it look like I'm saying crazy things. But that doesn't work because even the Associated Press has the headline that the British exit empowers Trump as a sign of populism and a blow to global government. Even George Soros came out and said that. It's crazy. It's like if I say the sky is blue, play you video of it being blue, and they say, no, you're crazy, you're a conspiracy theorist. This is a so-called intellectual elite arrogantly running a giant gaslighting operation. That's a CIA psychology term, where the most famous example is a film based on a play where this guy beats the daylights out of his wife, breaks her nose, knocks her, cheekbones in. And when she's bleeding, he looks at her and says, you're insane, I didn't hit you. And even when she's got witnesses, he says he didn't do it and acts super confident. And she's so overwhelmed, she thinks, okay, maybe she did it to herself. This is the highly suggestible, dumbed-down population. But even a dumbed-down, sleeping population, at a certain point, starts to wake up. So this is such an exciting time to be alive because mainstream media has a 6% trust rate now in Gallup polls and in AP polls. So what are they going to do? What are they going to do as they try to announce world government and global carbon taxes and taxing you by the mile and smart meters taxing you in your house and tracking everything you do and admitting they're doing it to you? And Zuckerberg, I forgot. Zuckerberg was in the New York Times. Guys, type it in. I meant to cover this Friday and didn't. Zuckerberg covers up his webcam camera, and you should too. Oh my gosh, 21 years after I said cover up cameras that were starting to come in standard on some Apples, I said it'll soon be ubiquitous and they're going to watch you with them and tax you with them. A few years after I warned of that, because an NSA insider warned me and said they're already doing it, Google patented it and announced in 2003 that they were going to start watching and listening to you and sending it through third-party aggregators for corporate data mining. Oh, but do I get an award for telling you first? No, no, no. I'm the kook, but Zuckerberg covers his up and says you should too. And the FBI director came out 2 months ago and said you should cover up your webcam. Because it's not just corporations breaking in. But what about your smartphone? Can somebody bring me a, quote, smartphone in a Apple phone? Because I don't bring mine with me very often. I don't have mine. It's a limited weapon system I only use to upload videos as a self-based computer. But I know it's got globalist tech and tracking. No one's telling you, though, there's a built-in camera on this. And that by federal law, it's not allowed to be turned off. Even when your camera's off, even when your phone is physically turned off, under the 1996 Telecommunications Act, all future computers and, quote, smartphones, they coined that term, have to be remotely accessed and appear like they're still off, but still recording and tracking you. Federal law. Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Central. We're here weekdays. I return live Sundays, 4 to 6 p.m. Central. Thank you so much for joining us. Coming up in the next segment, I'm going to get back into the British exit, this death blow to the EU, which is a key world government project. This is such a huge victory. But I also want to break down how the globalists are going to strike back. I predicted this on Thursday and Friday. They are now doing exactly as I predicted. It's not hard to understand them, though. They've done this to countless other nations and regions. It's very, very formulaic. But speaking of that, the UN program that we see taking place in Europe and the United States is funded and pushed by the big central banks that want to have cheap labor and want to basically play different nation states and populations off against each other. It's classic divide and conquer. That's no secret.